And let's keep track of all the business and related interest groups that are not attending this big financial confab that was supposed to be going down in Saudi Arabia next week. The final day to send your regrets or say that you are going is on Saturday. So far, the Treasury Secretary, Steve Mnuchin, is planning to attend, but a host of others are not, including Ford and Uber and Credit Suisse and Viacom and MasterCard and JP Morgan Chase and BlackRock and Blackstone. And we've got Standard Chartered and a host of others. And these are some of the big names and entities, some of the financial giants of the world who say, you know, we're just not too keen on being in this part of the world. Could that boomerang on them, and could it boomerang on the region? The former State Department press officer Morgan Ortagus. We've got EventShares Chief Investment Officer Ben Phillips and United Capital CEO Joe Duran. Joe, begin with you then on the impact of these folks who are saying, no, we're not going to be there. We're going to cool this out. Is there hell to pay for them?
You're asking me, Neil?
Yes, I am.
I think for the people who are opting out, no. I think that the markets are a little bit nervous about what is the reaction of the U.S. going to be. If we take Lindsey Graham's position and sanction, we don't want to get into another tariff war or trade war or putting sanctions on another country. They provide 9% of our oil. They own a lot of our debt. And it's a battle that I think the U.S. would rather not get involved with right now. I think, don't approve of the actions, but the question is, are the consequences of getting into another battle with another nation of a trade or tariffs or sanctions worth the cost? And I think that there's going to be a very interesting debate within the administration as to the consequences of what that might mean taking on another battle right now.
All right, well, we can't pick and choose the leaders with whom we're dealing, though, Morgan, right? I mean, whatever you think of the Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, I'm not going to call him MBS because I think it makes it sound like he's a car. But leaving that aside, I'm wondering what is Lindsey Graham's point here to say that, you know, he would target him, we're not going to deal with you, as if we can choose?
Well, to disagree with Joe slightly, I think that what we're talking about here is a lot more nuanced in the situation with Saudi than it is, say, with Iran or North Korea. Whenever Senator Graham was talking about sanctions this morning on Fox and Friends, I believe he was referring to global Magnitsky sanctions. Listen, we've had a relationship with Saudi Arabia for 70 years. It started well before the Crown Prince was born and will continue long after his reign. So I think what's important here, what the Congress is talking about, and I think what the President and Pompeo are talking about, is finding true responsibility for these actions. We will continue. I lived in Saudi Arabia, as you know, for a year and a half, working very closely with the Saudis as the Treasury attaché to curb the illicit financial flows to al-Qaeda and other terrorist organizations. We work with them very heavily from intelligence perspective. We work with them on oil. We certainly work with them for the sanctions against Iran, which will be re-implemented in just 3 weeks. They will continue to be a partner on that. So we're not talking about a trade war with Saudi. We're not talking about massive statewide sanctions on Saudi. We're talking about holding individuals responsible, potentially with global Magnitsky sanctions, and that is very, very different from what we're talking about with Iran and with North Korea. All
right, let's explore that a little bit, Ben. Bottom line is a lot of folks, Lindsey Graham apparently included, don't want to be dealing with the Crown Prince. But he's the guy. Now, obviously, it's up to the royal family then to decide, all right, you've worn out your welcome, and you're going to have to scoot down the bench. But easier said than done, right?
Yeah, I think that's right. And our view is really it's more of a geopolitical issue and less of a markets issue. I mean, Saudi's become less relevant of a trading partner to the U.S., and they're not even in the top 20 anymore if you look at total trade. So from a perspective of trade and markets, we think it's more noise right now. But we totally appreciate Morgan's comments on the geopolitical. I mean, Saudi is our biggest ally in the Middle East and one of our biggest allies and an extremely important party there for geopolitical, security.
Morgan, if I could go back to you real fast on a point that others have raised here, that there is a little bit of hypocrisy on the part of many who are saying that we had to embrace the Iranians to score that nuclear deal that could lead to dismantling their nuclear threat. And, of course, they're a far more heinous character in the region than Saudi Arabia is or will ever be, it would appear. And yet, judging on this, now not to minimize the potential of a royal family member targeting a journalist in the United States for execution, but it does seem like a double standard to me.
Well, listen, we deal with terrible actors around the world every day.
Right.
Look at what the Chinese are doing with internment camps of Muslims. I think that they should be sanctioned for that. Look at what the Russians do whenever they kill their political foes. We're seeing it in our region. We've seen it in elections in Latin America where you see people killed off. We saw it in Mexico. I mean, there's a report of I think it was 100 people that were killed leading up to this presidential election. So what the United States have to do here is not just in rhetoric. I think personally that the Democrats like to talk about this in rhetoric, but in words and in deeds, we need to continue to stand up for human rights. But
what
again,
does that mean, Morgan? What does that mean? Stand up for human rights. Does that mean cutting off some financial ties, risking that in the face of this guy, or what?
Well, the private sector is already doing that, right? When you look at the number of CEOs that you just pointed out that have pulled out of IIF, I think that is
they're pulling out of a conference, with the exception of Richard Branson. They're not pulling out money.
Well, there's reports, though, that their biggest lobbyists in D.C. have dropped them as a clients, 2 firms in D.C. There are reports that there are some companies in L.A., some entertainment companies that are no longer taking the investment. So, again, I want to continue a close partnership with Saudi Arabia. I think is vitally important. But it is important for this administration to hold whoever approved this accountable. And I think there's a difference between going after individuals and trying to sour the whole relationship. I don't think the administration's trying to do that.
All right, let's see what happens as the weeks and months go forward, Joe Duran. And one argument is that, well, the Saudis have promised to respond to whatever aggressive action we could take against them. Presumably, some people thought that could mean, holding off on oil supplies, cutting back production, cutting back shipments to the United States. That could obviously hurt them as well. But another idea being bandied about is they buy fewer of our Treasury securities at a time our debt is growing, or they start selling en masse. But they will not let this go unaddressed. What do you worry about the impact of that?
Of course, you have to be concerned about it. Again, I can't imagine that there's a lot to gain by putting broad sanctions on. And so, again, I think the administration will be careful about what they do because, again, we need their help in so many other ways.
But
as is the case in most nations
I'm getting
that we work
impatient with, and I know what you guys are saying. There's a diplomatic fine line. What is being careful here? To you, Joe, I mean, is it just a little bit of sanctions here, just a little bit of protesting a conference, not being part of it? Because they can look at it and say, well, we'll go to see if China wants to participate or Russia wants to. But you've heard the drill here. So what is a focused response to this?
Well, the first thing is you do it privately. The one thing you can't do is any response at all that's done in a public way gives them no face-saving exit. So the first thing you do is do it quietly. Don't make a big noise about it. Second, target the people that are actually involved in it. Don't make it a national mandate. Make it a personal mandate. And third, require
the people
an open
involved in it are part
investigation.
of the world's richest family on the planet.
Sure.
So if you throw out one or try to focus on one, you've got a large brood of other characters and sultans who are going to fill that gap.
It is a quagmire. And maybe you start by saying, let's make sure that we have an open investigation, which, of course, will probably go nowhere, but will calm things down for a while. The reality is very little is likely to actually occur, and I suspect there'll be a lot of noise, but there's just too much on the other side that we need from them to make this, that region is just, we need their help, candidly.
Yeah.